What's up guys, and welcome back. Today I'll be showing you how to make this trance banger. So I usually make the productions from scratch in my production videos on my channel, but I made this track a few days ago and I wasn't recording when I made it from scratch, but I still really wanted to break it down for you guys so you could learn from it and take some inspiration from it as well. Before we begin though, if you want to download the project file of this entire track so you can mess around, learn from it, and reuse some of the sounds, I don't really mind, then it's available to download over at my paid community. It's also got loads of other benefits like monthly sample packs, courses, etc. So if you're interested in that, it'll be linked down below. Now let me show you how I made this track. So all in all, this track's extremely simple. There's not too many things going on at all actually. It's also a reminder to yourself to keep your tracks minimal. I made a whole video about minimalism in music production if you want to check it out. It'll be linked in the top right, if it's either there or there. Whatever. Anyway, we start with this pad synth, which plays in the breaks, and then lastly in the second drop as well. And it sounds like this. The chord progression looks like this. It's just a sound with a few dissonances here and there. Kind of creates a more emotional vibe. So let's look at the sound itself. It's basically a polysynth, which is a stock synth in Bitwig. This is one of my favorite synths. And this is a patch that I recreate often a lot because it's a unique sound that I've only ever achieved through polysynth. It's basically like a synth, kind of like Serum or Vital would be, two oscillators, and then you can switch between the mix of the two here. So I'm mainly only using the first oscillator, not the second one. They both got a lot of voice of unison. You can see 12 and 14. Just a slight bit of unison detune. There's a little bit of noise, And then the interesting thing here is the filter oscillation FM. This is what really sets polysynth apart from all other synths. Let me just mess with it and you can hear what I mean. It gives this really weird movement to it, and I really love that sound, so I use it in a lot of my tracks. If I turn down the voice of unison, however, it's not the same effect. So it's kind of messing with the different voices. You can't hear it at all, actually. And then that's got an EQ on it. So let's move on. We got this pluck, which is actually this pluck, which I'll show you later, which plays the lead in the drops and the build-up. Sounds very familiar. So I just bounced that out, exported it, and put it in the beginning, or at the beginning of every 8 bars, you can see, in the intro at least, and then put some reverb on it. Sounds really nice. Then we got this trance chord here, which is just a preset that I've downloaded somewhere from some artist on for Serum. And then I play these repeating notes on E that you can see just repeat itself. The preset is just kind of like a super saw again, with some voices of unison on a saw wave and this evolution. Yeah, some effects, and it's got movement here, which is giving it though. We got an atmosphere on it. And that's the intro. So now we move on to the next 8 bars with the break, and we're introducing 2 new elements, and they're kind of important in this track. So it's this vocal sample. And yeah, it's just a sample. It's a vocal chop sample I found somewhere, and I really like the rhythm and fit the track. So with that, it sounds like this. And then we got this ARP. So that was bounced from Polymer, and that is a stock synth in Bitwig as well. This track was pretty much just made using stock synths, except for that Serum patch for the dun 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 sound. Everything's kind of stock, which is also cool once in a while to just only use the stock plugins, stock presets. That works pretty well. It's this preset called Uplifter, and when you play this one note, it makes this cool ARP. I then bounced that out, pitched up 4 semitones, and put some effects on it. So I cut out the lows, put a reverb on it, and yeah, it's the sound. So now you can feel the energy building up. We're adding a few new elements in each time. Here, now we got this hi-hat loop, which is coming in for the rhythm. And you can see on the waveform of the loop that it's the same loudness in the beginning as the end, but I put a volume automation on that. So you can see it goes from quiet to loud, so it gets even more energy towards the drop. Then we got this new atmosphere. The main 2 elements are these. It's the bass and this is the exact same bass that also plays in the drop. Guess what? It's another Bitwig preset. This one's called Auto Trance Bass, and it kind of fit perfectly with the vibe I was going for. And yeah, that just kind of plays the chord progression. I got a decapitator on it just to distort it a little bit. I will show you, however, inside the preset, what's giving it the trancey sound. So it's actually this arpeggiator note effects, which is giving it the trance sound. So if I turn that off, it just sounds like this. And there's also some built-in effects, which is an EQ and some multiband effects here. So it suddenly doesn't sound as interesting when it's just this. We turn on those effects again. Sounds a bit dirtier. And then this arpeggio. Yeah, sounds pretty cool. And then you got this trance pluck, which is also the lead that's playing in the drop. That sounds like this. And guess what? It's also a freaking preset. For a lot of tracks, I really don't mind using presets. They give me inspiration and they help me make the ideas that I have come to life. I really don't see anything wrong with presets, and if you do, I really think you should reconsider. But like the bass, I'm also going to break down the patch so you can actually understand what's going on and recreate it yourself if you want. So I'm going to turn off all these effects here. So again, really, really basic without any effects. We got 2 saw waves with 16 voices of unison and a very, very slight unison detune. So here this filter oscillator FM isn't enabled, so there's none of this movement going on. But it's a very plucky sound, and the filter cutoff you can see here is modulated or mapped by the envelope. So this is the same technique that you would do in Serum or Vital, where you map your envelope to the cutoff and give it the plucky sound. Now let's go through the effects. We got this little radiator. I added this into the chain for some distortion and for some saturation. We got this multiband effects 3. So this plugin in Bitwig splits the sound into 3 bands, and you can process those 3 bands individually. So this low end, which is being compressed, the mids are being compressed even more than the lows are, and then the highs are being compressed the least and boosted with an EQ. Then we got a dynamics, which is also compression. Then we got a peak limiter, which is kind of self-explanatory. So this transient split plugin inside Bitwig is very, very smart. If you use Bitwig, I highly recommend you use this plugin more because I use it all the time. So like a transient processor, you can individually affect the transient and the body or the tail of the sound. But in transient processors, you can only affect the loudness of either the transient and turn that down or up, or the release. With this plugin, you can put effects on the transient or the release itself. And this is really, really smart. So this wasn't in the preset chain itself, I added this in later. So I've gone into the transients only, boosted it 1.8 dB, and added this kilohertz phase distortion. It makes the transients only a bit crunchier and a bit more distorted. You can see if I turn down the sustain, you can hear only the transient. And without the phase distortion, with, kind of gives a bit more oomph. Then we got a reverb. And lastly, a delay. Normally you should never do this. You should never put your delay after the reverb, because then the delay also is affected by the reverb, and that gives this whole like bit too muddy sound. But I didn't make the preset and I didn't put this in order. And that's the build-up. It's really, really simple. Let's move to the drop. So there's a little clap on the beat before the drop just to transition, but there's nothing really much to explain about the drop because it's just the same sounds reused. You can see the lead is just the same as the one in the build-up. It's just a slight bit louder. Then we got this kick. This is one I stole or sampled from an Imanu track a while ago, and I found it in my library again and just put it in and felt it fit. Otherwise, the sounds are mainly the same, especially in the first section. We just got this clap effects thing at the end of 4 bars, which is kind of transitioning. Let's move over to the next 8 bars because new sounds are actually introduced. We got these 2 drum loops. Didn't even put any processing on them. They just sounded cool and I added them in the track. Then we got a few new melodic sounds as well. We got this sound. And this sounds like it doesn't really fit this track, but in the context, it's kind of cool actually. Let me play and see if you can hear it. It's definitely more prominent in the sections where there aren't that many things going on, but it still provides this background ambience and background tone to the sound, even though you can't really hear it that much. And then the last new sound is this thing. This is just a chord sample. I think I downloaded this from an Imanu pack a while ago. I was a part of his Patreon a few years back, so I think it comes from that. I'm not entirely sure. A lot of the time I just go through my sample library and find random things and drag them in, so I can't really remember where everything comes from. Anyway, the cool thing about this sound is that it's got a different progression, but it sounds cool on top of the other sounds. Because you don't hear the lower notes in the chord that much, but the higher notes really come through and act sort of like a melody on top. hear the melody and then the fuzzy noise thing on top, which is pretty cool. And yeah, then as you can see, there's not much more to explain because the track kind of just repeats itself. The synth goes again, some of the samples go again. The only difference is that the melody changes in the build-up and in the second drop. Let me show you that. And then there's a little switch up in the second drop because the ARP that we showed before, this one, in the first drop it plays from the beginning and it makes it sound really melodic and euphoric, but it doesn't play until after 8 bars in the second drop. And it makes it sound a little bit more aggressive and a bit more minimal. And then after the first 8 bars, the melody changes to the one that we used in the second build-up. Kind of gives a switch up, this little variation, and I think it sounds pretty cool. So that was it for this production and this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, really hope you learned something and could take some inspiration from it as well. And like I already mentioned, if you want to download the project file from this track, it's available to download over my community, which is linked in the description. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you guys next time.